Vitality Fitness Podcast, covering everything from fitness, health, and nutrition, with your host Matthew Smiley, covering top topics and answering all your fitness Q&As with featured guests.
Hello, this is the Vitality Fitness Podcast, and on this episode we're going to be speaking more about sports nutrition and performance, and the best person to speak to is Scott Robinson. So Scott, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, Matthew, thanks very much for having me on. So as you just said there, I'm a sports nutritionist and exercise physiologist. I have a human performance lab in Leicestershire, so in the Midlands of the UK. And that's where I see lots of different athletes of all different sports and also members of the general public too. And they come in for testing and sports nutrition support. So yeah, we work with a range of different athletes, from motorsport athletes to footballers. And then we've also got some boxers on the books as well, which is a nice variation, really.
Could you tell us a bit more about your background? So how you got started in nutrition, what made you show an interest in it, and where you took it from there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess my interest really in nutrition grew quite organically, I guess. I was always interested in sport when I was younger, went through the kind of natural route of doing PE at GCSE, then PE at A-level, biology, things like that. And then, yeah, just really enjoyed that side of things. So I went on to do a sports science degree at Liverpool John Moores University. And it's there where my passion for nutrition really grew. So I had some good mentors in Professor Graham Close, Professor James Morton, Professor Don McLaren as well. And they were all quite heavily nutrition based in what they did, and particularly in the applied work that they did as well. So I managed to get some good breaks and good opportunities with those guys to kind of get my foot through the door in elite sport. Then I went on to progress to do a PhD in exercise metabolism and nutrition at the University of Birmingham under the supervision of Dr. Gareth Wallace. And during this time, really, obviously, as well as studying nutrition and metabolism, I went in as the nutritionist at Aston Villa Football Club, which is where I stayed for, I think it was around about 4 or 5 years overall. So I had a really good stint there. And meanwhile, I was working for a company called Guru Performance, who maybe a lot of your listeners might be familiar with. So that was under Laurent Bannock. And we worked in private practice there, and also set up the Institute of Performance Nutrition, as it's now known, where we kind of set up a course in sports nutrition, so a post-grad course there. So got some good applied experience there, some good educational experience, and then went on to set up my own consultancy around about 2 years ago now, so my own business. And that's where I've recently set up a human performance lab, because previously I was going all over the country to do testing with the athletes, particularly the boxers. So I thought I could just bring it all in-house, build my own specialist lab, and ultimately be able to deliver a really high level of service to the athletes that I work with.
Yep. So you're talking about your breakthrough was working with footballers, working with Aston Villa. How have you kind of built this relationship now, working with quite a lot of the kind of boxers and combat sports?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, actually. I mean, it was a stroke of luck in a way, because my supervisor at Birmingham, Gareth, he one of his friends and also a lecturer at the time at the university, Dr. Andy Philp, who's now over in Australia, he's really good friends with the strength and conditioning coach who works down in London, called Duncan Ogilvie. And Duncan started to work with a pro boxer called Lawrence Okoli, who'd come out fresh from the Olympics and had just turned pro at the time. So Duncan spoke to me, said, would you be interested in supporting Lawrence with some nutrition? So I said, yep, sounds great. Started doing some work with Lawrence. Think hopefully did a pretty good job. And then obviously word of mouth spreads. And then, he spoke to Cal Yafai up at Sheffield. And Cal's obviously Birmingham based, so with me being in Birmingham as well, it made sense for us to link up and just discuss how we could potentially work together. And then, I've been in Cal's team now for a good 2-3 years, done a fair few fights with him as well. And it's grew quite organically from there. So really just word of mouth, and other boxers getting word of what I do in the boxing world and how I might be able to help them.
Yeah, can you dive in and tell us what fighters you're currently working with now? Because it just seems to be expanding. Every time I check, you've got another fighter on the cards.
In terms of the fighters, there's obviously Cal Yafai, Okoli, there's Callum Smith, Anthony Crolla as well. Did the last couple of fights with him before he retired, which was fantastic. Got a light heavyweight called Chad Sugden, who's up and coming. Had a great performance against Spider Richards on a Matchroom show just before the back end of just at the back end of last year. Got Jordan Gill, who's just absolutely fantastic to work with. Cal's brother Gamal, who's also fantastic. Going out to see those guys in Texas on Sunday, ready for Cal's fight the following week on next Saturday. Worked with Conor Benn as well, and also Khalil Majid, who's based up in Bolton, who's absolutely fantastic to work with. Callum Johnson as well, who's obviously potentially got a European or a world title shot next, which is fantastic for him because he puts in an incredible amount of work into everything that he does, like all the guys do, really. So yeah, I hope I've not missed anyone off. I've probably missed one name off from that, but yeah, quite a few, and it's a really nice mix and really nice variation of people, good people to work with.
Yep, it's definitely growing. Can you tell me more about the services you do then? So if I was a boxer just starting out and I came to meet you, what would be the process? So where do you take it from there?
Yeah, sure. So that we have lots of different options available. Obviously, because we've got the lab, we can do kind of baseline testing on the athletes to check their metabolism, check their fitness, check their bloods. We can do advanced sweat testing, and then we can send them on their way and give them a program to follow that's more so maybe less contact points, should we say. So obviously boxers all work with different budgets depending on where they are in their career. So we can provide support on different levels for fighters. Those guys who I've just mentioned there, I work one-to-one with during their whole camp. So I'm sure if I turn my phone over, I'll probably have 5 or 6 messages from a few of them now waiting for me to get back. But that's because we speak every single day. So they'll usually, if we're doing like an 8 to 10 to 12 week camp, they'll come in for around about 2 to 3, maybe 4 testing blocks just to check how everything's changing and developing. And then I'll write out their nutrition plan pretty much for every single day. So we'll map out every meal, every snack, every drink that they have over the course of the camp. And then I'll be on the other end of the phone to them pretty much all times just to make sure that they're happy and everything's going well. And not only do they make the weight as best as possible, but they can perform as best as possible during the whole camp. Obviously, so they adapt as best as possible, and then they can perform well on the night.
Yeah. So what main factors are you looking for when the fitness testing, when you do it at the start?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the fitness test, we can look at lots of different things. So we can look at basically the size of their engine, so their VO2 max. So are they fit enough to be in that ring on fight night? And then also their so-called engine efficiency, so how many miles to the gallon they can do. So by that, we'll look at their things like their ventilatory thresholds, their lactate thresholds. We can also look at fat max as well, which is a really interesting one, to look at how much fat they can use at different exercise intensities, which has big implications for carbohydrate use whilst in the ring as well, and helping to delay that onset of fatigue. So, I mean, that's the fitness test. We offer probably 5 or 6 other tests as well that's relevant to the boxers and helping them perform as best as possible.
Yeah. Do you feel that the boxers are getting more educated on nutrition now? Back in the day, it used to be a matter of putting in less fuel and trying to make weight. Now they're getting educated on basically being able to fuel for the right sessions.
Yeah, 100%. That's a big focus on what I do with the guys. And you know, it might not make the best sense from a business perspective in terms of I'm teaching them to actually learn and understand and become more autonomous with their nutrition. So actually they don't need me as much as what they initially did, maybe when we first started out. But what's good about that is that once they learn things, they're very good at retaining that information, getting into the right habits, and then we can continue to build. And when we build, we can then find those extra few percenters that make the real difference to their performance. So yeah, like you said, it was very old school. There's still some old school practices going on now. But you know, if you look at the likes of the boxers who really struggle to make the weight, it doesn't always need to be a struggle, and they don't need to restrict as much as what they probably think in the final few weeks or even during camp. You know, I mean, Callum Smith, during his last week, he had on average 3,500 calories during that final weight cut. But it's just about being sensible with the foods and also choosing the right types of foods at the right times throughout camp. And there's ways in which you can make weight, even for Callum, who's huge at the weight. You can do it really well and feel well when you make the weight, provided it's all on point.
What do you think are the main errors that are being made in boxing at the moment?
The main errors?
And yeah, in regards to trying and making weight, is it just, do you think more like the too high or reduced calories, or let's talk about the kind of dangers to the kind of reducing water?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the dehydration is a big thing, particularly in the final week. It's just, there might sometimes need to be a small amount of dehydration, so maybe acute dehydration of 2 to 3% body mass. But that's fine, because that's what the boxers do pretty much day in, day out during training anyway. So it's not something that the body's not really used to. And sometimes we might throw that in tactically, because if the guys can sweat out 2% body mass the day or the evening before or the morning of a weigh-in, then that's 2 to 3% of body mass that we don't have to lose, and that we can actually add more calories and more fuel in during the whole course of the camp. I think any more than 4 or 5% could be a detriment on performance. And I've seen guys go as high as 10, 12, 13% body mass dehydration, even more sometimes. And actually, although they'll reload after the weigh-in, they'll put in the electrolytes, they'll put in the fluids, that detriment is still there, and it's very hard to fully reverse. So the stress that's actually put on the body is quite high. So definitely the dehydration is something that needs to be managed quite carefully. But provided you get the foods right during camp, and particularly on those final couple of weeks beforehand, I really don't see a need for most fighters to need to dehydrate or put themselves through the mill that much. I'd say another mistake is that boxers don't fight or train with enough carbohydrate in their system. So a really common practice is for boxers to obviously carb load after the weigh-in, so that they've got enough fuel in the tank, but they've not actually taught their body how to use those carbohydrates during camp. So the body can't really tap into them as effectively in the ring and going through the rounds, particularly the championship rounds is when it makes a big difference. If you've not primed your metabolism to use the carbohydrate and the fat as and when required, you're gonna struggle, and that's going to show in the ring, particularly as the fight goes on into the later rounds.
Do you feel it's more of a challenge working with fighters than working with the other athletes that you have?
I think they all bring their own unique challenges. I think boxing is probably one of the toughest sports for a nutritionist to work in that you're trying to achieve lots of different things all at once. So, for example, a boxer will come back into camp and they'll need to lose so much body weight, but actually they're going to need to try and preserve as much muscle mass as possible. They're going to need to try and fuel as well for their sessions, try and reduce the risk of injury, reduce the risk of illness, protect their bodies, protect their health, protect their well-being, whilst also performing well and being able to perform at, say, 10 p.m. on Friday, the 27th of April or whatever it might be. So it's a huge balance with everything. But for me, it's one of the most exciting sports, because I've trained in university for 8 years for this. I've done 12 years of applied practice. So really, it's exciting for me to bring everything that I know to the table with these guys and help them out, because at the end of the day, it's a dangerous sport. They put their lives on the line when they're in the ring, and if I can help them to generally be much happier during camp, feel better, perform better, and keep them safe or safer and healthier, then it's a really nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah. You're talking about them coming into the start of camp like overweight. What would be the ideal weight for a fighter for you to come in at weight? Like, what's too heavy?
I guess, I work with guys all over from all different weight categories, but one thing I do say to them is, look, you don't want to really blow up so much, obviously, that it's going to make life really difficult. They need to forward think, and they need to think about, okay, if I blow up and if I just binge eat outside of camp, I'm going to make my life much more difficult when I'm in camp, because that weight's going to have to come off somehow. But likewise, I think it's really important that after they've had a 10 to 12 week camp, that they go away and they switch off and they enjoy themselves and they recharge. Because if they're constantly on it all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year, they're going to burn out.
Yes.
Really, it's definitely a balance with it all. I think they should go and enjoy themselves, and I don't make them feel guilty for having the kind of treat foods or whatever it is, but there definitely needs to be a balance between blowing up too much, and also having a bit of fun and relaxing and enjoying themselves after 10 to 12 weeks of really hard work. So yeah, usually I'd say in terms of a percentage, probably no more than 15% over the weight is generally quite a good sensible target, and then we can bring that down quite nicely provided we've got long enough in camp. There's obviously some of the younger guys such as Chad Sugden, who's the light heavyweight. He doesn't necessarily always know when he's next going to fight. I mean, he was called onto that Matchroom show at last minute. He had about 3-4 days notice, maybe 5. So that's where with those guys, they really need to manage it a lot better. And really fortunately for Chad, and this is testament to him, is that he kept his weight in a really good place. So actually it was really easy for him to make the weight as and when he needed to, if he did get that call, which ended up happening. So yeah, it depends on the fighters. For example, Cal Yafai or Callum Smith, they probably know it's going to be a short while until they fight again, so they can afford to do that. Whereas for some of the younger, more up-and-coming guys, they probably need to be a little bit more on it.
More on the ball, yeah. So let's break down the ideal kind of diet for a fighter for you. What would be obviously, I'm guessing individuals work within different macros?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the ideal diet, I guess, with the guys that I work with, they're all on very different diets actually, because so it's hard for me to answer that really precisely, I guess, but there's some fundamental principles that we'll follow, because obviously we check their bloods, we check their metabolism, we check what's actually in their sweat. So we look at not only how much fluid do they lose during training, but what's actually in that fluid, what's the composition of the electrolytes, so that we can give them bespoke hydration drinks, so they're replacing exactly what their body needs. And that's probably one of the most insightful tests that I can do with a boxer, really, or any athlete in general. I think in terms of the nutrition, we give them plenty of options. So we don't just say, look, here, eat this, eat that at these times. We teach them what to do. We teach them what to eat, why they're eating it, how it's going to benefit them. We take into account their food preferences as well. So what are the foods that they most enjoy eating? What are the foods that they least enjoy eating? We do food intolerance tests too, so we can find out what foods their bodies don't respond particularly well to. So those are kind of things. They're not, obviously intolerances aren't allergies, but are things that the body doesn't necessarily react well to and can sometimes lead to GI distress. So we'll definitely cut those foods out at important times. So maybe on double training days when there's a lot of demand on the body, and then also in and around fight week too, we'll cut it out just as a security policy, really. I do have the guys training on high carbohydrate diets at certain times, then moderate carbohydrate diets at certain times, and low carbohydrate diets at certain times. So it varies depending on what their schedule is. So they'll send me their schedule for the week and we'll map it out. So usually if they send me their schedule on a Thursday, I'll map out the following week on a Friday for them. And that'll be each day will be completely different depending on what type of sessions they're actually doing and what the aim and the goal of that session is in terms of adaptation.
Is there any non-negotiable foods that you would put into the diet?
That I would take out?
No, that you would put in. Definitely, like things that are non-negotiable, like if they say they don't like it, you need to eat it.
Not really. It's not really happened to me.
Yeah.
There's always a way around it, I think. If someone says it's a non-negotiable food, then I don't know. I don't really think that's the best way to work with an athlete or build a relationship with an athlete. It's not for me to force something on someone. It's for me to try and educate them as to the reasons why it's important. But ultimately, it's their body, it's their life. If they really don't want to have it, then that's my job, not theirs, to find a workaround and make a way that it can work if there's a particular benefit from that food that they don't want to eat.
Yeah. Let's talk about, so that they've got their nutrition on point, so let's talk about sports supplements. So what would you advise, or what supplements do you use for your clients?
Yeah, good question. Again, it varies quite significantly between the guys. So one of the tests that we'll do is a bloods test. So we've actually got a state-of-the-art bloods lab next door. So we can, if a boxer does come into us for a bloods test, then we can get the results pretty much straight away within 2 to 3 hours. So if they're doing the full battery of tests, they can actually come in, have their blood taken, it will go next door to be analysed, and then by the time they've done all the tests, we can sit down and talk through the bloods with them. In those bloods panels, we look at around about 60 to 70 different markers, so vitamins, proteins, minerals, hormones that are all relevant to performance. And what we'll do there is we'll look for any deficiencies. Usually even athletes that have the best diet in the world at particular times of the year, whether it's weather dependent or just because of any stress that they might have been under or a particularly demanding training schedule, they might be deficient in a few things. And if there's certain things in there that we can't correct through food, then we might look to supplement. So examples would be vitamin D, particularly at this time of year. It's quite low for athletes, and that's very difficult to obtain sufficient amounts in food. So usually most guys would be on a vitamin D supplement, and then we can track that over time to make sure that they're responding well, and also they're not getting too much vitamin D also. Other things I think can be beneficial are creatine. I think creatine is a really underrated supplement in sport in general, but also boxing through fear of weight gain. But actually, if you're strategic with how you implement creatine, it's one of the most beneficial, if not the most beneficial supplement that a boxer could have, really, because it helps to protect the bone, the muscle, the brain, helps with the repeated high intensity efforts as well. There's numerous benefits from it for a boxer to have. And then other ones, beta-alanine is also good as an intramuscular buffer. And then really it just depends. I mean, maybe fish oils, depending on what their omega-6 to 3 ratio is. And yeah, just there's the sports gels, sports drinks at strategic times, and recovery shakes too.
Yeah, can I dive into a wee bit more on the creatine? So,
yeah,
as you said, that a lot of fighters kind of avoid it because obviously the fear that it's holding water. When is an ideal time to kind of take the creatine and when to come off it for making weight?
Yeah, usually I think, well, for most guys, some guys, we don't really want to risk it, just through fear of the body weight gain, but that's largely because of that, like the water that it holds sometimes, or water holdage in the body. Sometimes it can cause an increase in lean muscle mass. And if we do a body composition test on an athlete at the start of camp, it might be that they actually can't afford to gain any muscle during camp. So that's something where we need to be really careful that if we do put creatine in, it might cause them to gain muscle and therefore struggle to make the weight because they simply don't have enough body fat to make that weight. And we definitely don't want to be trying to take away muscle towards the back end of the camp, towards the fight. With some guys, though, we can implement it all the way through. So we can give them a nice maintenance dose all the way through camp and they'll be absolutely fine with it. But in terms of making the weight in that final stage, I usually cut it out around about 7 to 9 days before the weigh-in. And that typically leads to a reduction in body mass of, on average, probably about 1.5 to 2% that they'll lose just through taking the creatine away. And then that excess water will come off, which will reduce the body weight by around about 1.5 to 2%.
Yeah, that's ideal. Let's say I can't get you on here and not speak about Game Changers. You've probably been asked this about a million times, but what was your thoughts on the programme, and would you recommend a full plant-based diet for any of your athletes?
Yeah, I think the programme itself for me was quite frustrating to watch. I think the first time around I only got about 45 minutes into it and then I just had to turn it off. Second time round I watched it in its entirety. I think it's always important to give these things a shot. I think there were some messages in there that were reasonable and quite good, in that the general population need to, as a whole, just increase their intake of healthy fruits and vegetables, look for high quality food sources and try and have a varied diet and cut down on the junk food, really. But a lot of the science in there was very flaky. Seemed to be a very, very biased argument.
One-sided there.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think it's, for people who don't necessarily know more about this, it can be very convincing. And obviously on such a large platform such as Netflix, it's going to reach a lot of people and influence a lot of people. I think a lot of the comparisons that they did with the athletes, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I'm sure it was a pre-match meal where they gave either steak or something like Kentucky Fried Chicken, and then the other athlete had a super healthy, like superfood bowl or something like that. Yeah. And it's obvious that the players not had the KFC or the fried food would feel better for the game. That's just simple science. It's not really even science. In all the football clubs I've worked at, none of the players have those kind of foods like steak or Kentucky Fried Chicken before a game. They'll always have lean meats, lean fish. There'll be a salad bar. There'll be healthy carbohydrate options. But in terms of actually a plant-based diet, I think that in terms of performance, it's not necessarily a magic bullet like people might say that it is. But that being said, I'm definitely not averse to it. If an athlete comes to me and they says, I'd like to go vegetarian or I'd like to go vegan, we talk through the reasons why, and maybe that's a belief reason, then that's absolutely fine. No problem at all, and we can make it work. It might be a little bit harder because sometimes those diets are typically lower in protein and then also much higher in carbohydrate too. So we need to manage that quite carefully. But certainly, I don't think it's a magic bullet like people say that it can be. But actually, if an athlete comes to me and they say they want to do it, then we can do it and we can do it well.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's another fact on the programme that it was when they were talking about the gladiators, and obviously they were saying that they were really high plant-based, but again, it would come down to the environment, what kind of food was about, because apparently in other places there would have been a higher fat content that would have been taken.
Yeah, that's it. And I think at the end of the day, it's just cherry picking. You look at the guys in boxing that go into the ring now, and gladiators was a very different sport, really. But you look at the ability of these guys in the ring and what they can actually, the gears they can shift through and how they can perform. I don't think it's just not an accurate comparison, really. And if that's the best data that people have is to go back in time and look at gladiators, then I think they're really struggling to find a solid scientific rationale for themselves.
Is there any of the kind of plant-based foods that you would advise people to take? Like, I've seen there's obviously a lot more studies on kind of like beetroot juice and stuff. Kind of seeing it that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's loads of plant-based foods that I'll implement into the fighters' diets during the camp. That's a no-brainer for me. But I'll also put in high-quality meats, high-quality fish, some dairy as well, because that is very good at helping to protect the bones, as well as also being a protein source. But things like nitrates, so beetroot, spinach, those kind of things are excellent for performance. And Calify hates me at the moment because I'm including quite a lot of beetroot in his foods, and he doesn't mind spinach so much, but he hates the beetroot. But we include it at strategic time points. And fair play to him, it's the first thing that's on his plate. He waffles it down and then he enjoys the rest of his meal. But things like that, there's certainly benefits, but I don't think you necessarily need to restrict other foods such as meat and fish and dairy and things like that too, if it's not required. You were saying
it's obviously high in carbs, but it's low in protein. There's deficiencies they're saying in B12. Is there any other deficiencies in the kind of plant-based diet?
Yeah, I mean, it really varies. I've had plant-based athletes who I've worked with in the past, and their bloods have been actually very good on the whole. Typically, their B12 has been okay, or their B9 or their iron can be absolutely fine, provided they get it right. But in terms of the risk of deficiency, then usually it's B12, B9, folate, and then also iron and things linked with iron such as transferrin saturation and things like that too. So definitely that's where the blood testing would come in really helpful. That is, if an athlete is on a plant-based diet, then we can actually look into the bloods, because all too often, and this is a point I forgot to make when I was talking about supplements, is all too often people just say, have a multivitamin, have some iron, have some vitamin C, have vitamin D, have this, have that. And they've actually not looked into the bloods or done any testing at all. So they're kind of just shooting in the dark. And actually too much of a good thing can be detrimental to performance, because, for example, if you have too much vitamin C, so over, I think it's 1,000 milligrams or a gram per day consistently for 7 days, that can actually impair the adaptive response to training. So when an athlete's got a saturated training load and they can only train so many times a week, my role is to try and help them get more out of those sessions. How can we get 2, 3, 4, 5% more out of those sessions? And if they're having too much vitamin C, that can actually blunt the adaptive response to exercise, so they don't respond as well. So it's a case of, you can have too much of a good thing. It's always good to test and then go from there, really, based on the data.
Yeah, based on the obviously the information that you get from that. Let's talk about can the general public just contact yourself and come in for fitness testing that way and get all this checked out?
Yeah, 100%. So we work with general pop, we work with corporate clients, so company execs, CEOs, but also just regular folk who want to come in and kind of get tested, and whether it's a general plan with their nutrition or their fitness or whatever it might be, anyone is welcome through the door. We have lots of different clients on a day-to-day basis who come to us, whether it's their goals are just to improve general health and well-being, whether it's improvements in body composition, whatever it might be. We've got the facilities to be able to help out lots of different people, which is really nice for me, because it brings lots of different people through the door. So you get to meet different personalities, help people who have their own challenges, their own goals, their own targets. So yeah, absolutely, we can work with pretty much anyone.
Yeah, and if the people don't want to come do this testing, can you, maybe they just want to improve their eating, is there ways that they can contact you that way? I know obviously you do a recipe book.
Yeah, so we do a recipe book, and that can be found on the website. So that's a recipe book subscription. So you can sign up for 1, 3, 6 or 12 months, and you get a recipe book each month delivered to your inbox, which are all calorie and macro counted meals. There's a MyFitnessPal barcode scanner on there too, so you can, if you are tracking your foods on MyFitnessPal, you can easily log them. So really just to give people plenty of different ideas with breakfasts, main meals, desserts, snacks, smoothies, things like that too, so that generally they can start eating a little bit better and have a little bit more inspiration with their meals. We also do kind of online plans as well, so we work with people from many different countries around the world, really, where we'll do remote consultations with them. We'll send them a screening questionnaire, full dietary analysis, see what they're currently doing, and then just look for rooms for improvement. I mean, the testing is fantastic, it's great, but it's also not for everyone. And some people just don't have access to be able either to come down to the lab, or maybe they're just not interested in that. And if that's the case and they just want to improve their general diet, then, you know, we also do online plans as well.
Yeah. So before we finish up, just tell us, you've obviously got a big season coming up. You've got Cal Yafai fighting. Who else have you got coming out, and what else is coming up for yourself? Yeah,
so we've got Cal Yafai, and we've got Scott Quigg, who's out on the 7th of March. So I've been working really hard with Scott this camp, which has been fantastic. Scott is just an absolute dream to work with. He's brilliant, just so switched on, super intelligent with everything, picks it up well. So he'll be fighting on the 7th of March, which is a big fight against Carroll. But I think he does the job quite well on him with that one. It's probably, I know people say it all the time, and it frustrates me a little bit, so I kind of don't want to say it, but I feel like I have to, is that he's had the best camp that I think he's ever had. He's just, I mean, the treadmill scared. When Scott steps on the treadmill and he goes to do a fitness test, he's an absolute machine on it.
Scott's always been quite fit, and then he's always been on point with his nutrition as well. Am I right in saying that he's always carried a book about everything that he eats?
Yeah, he's super switched on with it all. I mean, his fitness has always been high. I don't think it's ever been this high from all the, you know, I think I've worked with him for a couple of years. So after the Valdez fight, I came on board the team and we started working together. So I got a good couple of years of data on him, and he's always been scarily fit and healthy. But now he's probably in his best condition. And then with his food, yeah, he's super switched on. We map it out to an absolute T, which helps him massively during camp, and hopefully will really help him in the ring too. So there's Scott, who's out on the 7th of March. Then Khalil Majid is on the 14th of March. And then I think Jordan Gill and Chad Sugden are both out on the 28th of March. So yeah, it's going to be it's a busy week coming up. And in the midst of all that, I'm trying to move two houses into so it's a bit mental at the moment, but all good fun. And yeah, I love being at the boxing.
So your thoughts on the Cal Yafai fight? Sorry.
Yeah, Cal.
Tough fight.
Yeah, it's a great fight. It is a great fight. I mean, you know, Gonzalez, I think the whole of the Yafai team have huge respect for him, and I think, you know, word on the grapevine, he has a lot of respect for us and a lot of respect for Cal. So two gentlemen going into the ring, but two warriors as well. I think it'll be a great fight on the night. I think Cal couldn't do any more this camp. I think he's been absolutely fantastic, and I'm confident that he gets the job done on Gonzalez and then moves on to potentially Estrada for the unification.
And you jump out to help him make weight?
Yeah, so I'll go out there on what day is it today? Friday. I'll go out there on Sunday. No, it's Thursday today. I got out there on Sunday to be out for the week. Fly out first thing Sunday morning, and then got the week there with him to make sure the final stage is absolutely spot on.
Yep. All I can say is thanks very much for answering the questions and being on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens in these fights and with the people that you're working with over the next few months and years.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, mate. Thanks very much for having me on.
Thanks very much. Cheers.